So when you have the money just sitting there in a trust that's ready and willing to use, that means you've got the opportunity of time on your side. And you can then actually source out the best deals in order to build greater wealth on that.
I've got clients, not only they're selling multi-million-dollar land in Texas, but they're also selling these businesses, and they're faced with a lot of tax. So team me up on the deals that you're working on, and maybe we'll talk a little bit strategy here to how we might be able to help them.
What I love of the fact is that we can work together in finding solutions for our clients more than ever. Like I just told you we jumped on, I said, hey, in conversation, I was with two of my clients, they're selling their businesses, and they both need tax solutions because they do not want to be hit heavily. And when you're selling a $4 million business, you've got to figure out what strategies you can do to keep that money, because they've worked 26 years in building this business. And so they're trying to figure out, how do we keep this in our pockets versus giving it all away?
Absolutely. So let's geek out with this for a minute here. So it's a $4 million exit potentially here on a business sale, which by the way is not 1031 eligible for everyone, right? And let's just imagine they actually want to invest into land with Vanessa. She has an amazing opportunity. Values have come down a little bit, or they want to start running cattle. They want to start running whatever other business opportunity with land. And yet they're selling a business and they can't 1031 into it. And they have all this tax. Now, if they're in Texas, by the way, neat part about Texas and Florida, some other states, there's no capital gains tax state. However, federal is 20%. And then you have like the Obamacare, Medicare, it's like a 3.8%. Depending on depreciation recapture, you could be a little bit more what they're selling. But what's this amount is about 25% of the tax. So if they're selling at $4 million, depending on type of,
lost $1 million.
Yeah, it costs them about $1 million, right? It costs them about $1 million. So that's a big amount of wealth, right? That it can be deferred. And so step one, Vanessa, we could set up a trust. Step two, the trust could go into the contract, whatever the contract might be, right? And it's like an option, like a 1031. Like in a 1031, what do? You add the language into the contract as an option to use at the close of escrow. We do the same thing with the trust. And so they exercise the option, essentially. They can assign the interest to the trust, and the $4 million hits the trust instead of hitting their personal account. Now they're in a deferral state, and they do what's called an installment sale. A little bit of what you talked about in the beginning. You said, hey, we buy on terms, meaning we give a $2 million down payment, let's say on a $5 or $6 million piece of land, and the seller carried back. Now in that scenario, they carried at 0%. In this scenario, we write the note at typically 6, 7, 8, 9%, but we do not finance the buyer, we finance the trust. So the buyer shows up, let's say for $4 million for the business, the trust jumps in right in between the seller and the buyer. And what happens is the seller sells it first to the trust, gets a promissory note for $4 million, and the trust sells it to the buyer. They take capital, they take the title, and they're gone. And what's left is this money is sitting typically in like a Charles Schwab. And then guess what? Vanessa finds a land deal, an opportunity. What questions do you have at that point? The trust can invest into that.
Well, I find it very similar to 1031 exchanges. I've been blessed to do quite a few of those through my life. And 1 year I had 15, which is almost unheard of to do that many in a year. But I was very blessed. And what I look for then is that we look for the optimal right deal. So when you have the money just sitting there in a trust that's ready and willing to use, that means you've got the opportunity of time on your side. And you can then actually source out the best deals in order to build greater wealth on that.